It's, well, people want to say it kind of seems like it means welcome, but you don't need to, we don't shorten it. I was listening to a program this morning on CBC. It's about English structured sentences and but I didn't get a chance to hear all of it. So first we welcome people in. You're telling everybody, it's a group of people, not just an individual, but it means everybody, come on in. And then your name, whatever your name is, mine is Colin Sanhlga. Colin is walking, Sanhlga is day. That's a man who walks in a room carrying a newborn child. But the way it's translated is brings a special day. And then Hinu di Kya'an. It doesn't say that my name is Colin Sanhlga. Colin Sanhlga is how I am called. So maybe each of you can introduce yourself, your Haida name, then Hinu di Kya'an. So
not Colin Hinu di Kya'an.
Take slowly. Sinu di Kya'an. Kya'an. See, that's two. This is where the 7 would be. Kya'an. Kya'an.
Hinu di Kya'an.
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 And then di, see, Hinu, we put those two together. D, we put an accent mark over the I, which means your voice goes up. Hinu di Kya'an. Kya'an. See, it's not just straight like English. Hinu di Kya'an.
Hinu di Kya'an.
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 Did we gave our Hinu di Kya'an?
Kya'an, yeah, not Kya'an, but Kya'an. And your name, if you don't have a Haida name, use your English name.
Laura.
Hinu di Kya'an. Go ahead. Hinu di Kya'an. See, we don't have possessive pronouns in Haida, so this word doesn't mean, sometimes it's translated as I or me, but it's really this person. This person is called. So everybody is identified as a person. When we use the word Hal, H-A-L, it's that person, or this person. But when you refer to yourself, and then there's another one too, it's H-L. We'll get into that as we go along. So,
Histiga Hinu di Kya'an.
Hithi Kiga Hinu.
what's your name?
Vanessa.
Okay, and then his name is Keith Giga.
Vanessa. Kiwan Sim.
Hinu.
Hinu.
Hinu, like canoe.
Vanessa Hinu.
Di
Di
Kya'an.
Kya'an.
Now put it together. Hinu di Kya'an.
Vanessa Hinu E Kigan.
Kya'an. Kya'an.
Hinu Di.
Sometimes we'll put a period here so you know to separate Kya'an. It's learning the rhythm of the language too. And if you're not familiar with it, it's going to take a little bit, so you have to exaggerate it a little bit. So, anyway, like I said, when I was just a little boy, my chana took me to a group that were, I'll say, history keepers. And every session, when there was something they wanted me to remember, they would always say, Hawit Kuna, come here, dear one. Outlaw, Aji done ping dong song. Walk over here, dear one, and sit down. I'm going to show you something. Don't easily do. Prepare yourself. And it said our mind is like a vessel filled with silty water. And so when you prepare yourself, what I had to do is put my hands like this, put my feet out in front of me, cross my ankles, and put my head down. And breathe slowly through my nose. And slow myself down while I'm waiting for that to settle. And when I feel like it's settled, then I'd say, I'm prepared. And then that person would start talking, and it's like I could go inside of them. And I didn't hear the words, I experienced everything he was talking about. And so my memories are of having experienced all those things rather than just memorize the words. So we did a short exercise last time about these little things here. Gyatla is just stand up, Kotla is to sit down. We don't have on there Hoi. Come here. I forgot to put that on there.
So Hawit is like you one person to come here?
Oh, you can
Or
indicate
everybody.
a whole bunch of people too. Hoi.
And when they say Hakuitka,
If Chris got that means for you to walk over here.
okay.
See, when it wasn't so much a rite of passage the way people think it is, but we had to swim. We'd swim in wintertime. I think all the boys and girls did it. But there was a certain point at which us boys, like I was taken out, and it's in the fall time when the storms begin. And these old ones that were my teachers went to this little bay, and I had to strip down and wade out into the water. And the Pacific is cold anyway, but in September. And they built a little fire on the beach. Then I had to wade out to where it was waist deep and then face toward the fire. And they would call to me, come on up by the fire and get warm. You can do it. But I had to go down inside, like when I was getting ready to listen to them, to where it's quiet and still. And once I could do that, then my spirit would go up and sit by the fire and keep warm. And as the tide was going out, I had to follow it, so I stayed waist deep. And then as it came back in, I would come in with it. And you stayed in the water until just the daylight. Then, walk over here, dear boy, walk over here. And it's hard to walk when the legs are numb. And as they're coming out, getting out of the water, there's blueberry switch. Blueberry is different from other wood. It doesn't just rot, it ossifies. It almost becomes like stone. It'll break into pieces. But that's what they start whipping my leg with the switch. I didn't feel it until they drew blood. And it wasn't much. But then all the feeling came back, and God, was it painful when all the feelings suddenly come back. But it was part of the process. Here, what the people we call aat'aay, the eagle people, that's the Coast Salish. The way they would do it is similar to ours, but they find a flowing stream. And they do it almost every day. They would sit in the water waist deep until their legs became numb. And when they became numb, the mind became very clear. And in the movie White Fang 2, we shot a scene with that in the Squamish River. It was kind of a funny thing, but this Al Harrington was actually Hawaiian and Samoan, and he was playing the Haida chief. Well, special effects had these big plastic tanks, fiberglass tanks, and it had hot water in them. And they had a hose that went down on the bank of the river and out into it, and they had it hidden, buried. And the nozzle was facing upstream, so when they start pumping warm water, it sort of make like an umbrella light. And Al Harrington's character was supposed to go out there and sit down in that cold water. And I told him, I said, whatever you do, don't treat this as a game. This is real. I mean, we've got some special effects, but it's real. So he was walking out there, and he went like this, symbol, now it's complete. And there was eagles circling up there. And he watched it, and when he hit his mark, he sat down, but he missed his mark, and he sat in the cold water, and he was so they had to cut and go and help him get out of the water. And I told him, I said, I told you it's not a game. But so the next time he was very careful. It's like walking on the edge of that knife blade. If you don't watch your step, you could slip and fall off the world. So anyway, we shot that scene there. And he was teased there quite a bit, everything. I don't remember who it was. Maybe it was Deborah Brown. She'd smile and go, ooh, ooh, ooh.
A couple of days ago, going on that visualizing and actually experiencing what you're saying or what you're presenting, she called me up the other day and said, I dreamt about those giant black birds.
Oh yeah, I did. Yeah, they were hunting kids, so we had to take care of them, and it was something that happened all the time, so we were used to it. It was like a rites of passage thing. And it didn't seem like a dream, it seemed like a past life experience. And then how we get to the nest, like they're up in the mountains, and then we have to get to the underneath the nest to approach it, because if we go on top, they would know, and sometimes they wouldn't land. And I could hear the wings. I remember the experience of hanging onto their things and bringing them down. And actually, this one guy in my small town, whenever I seen his face, I would remember more about that experience. And I'd only see him at the Frederick Center at certain gatherings, but he probably wondered why I'm just so can't stop looking at him, because I was hunting with him in our past life. That's what it was. And every time I seen him, I'd remember more of it.
In Haida, we call that one Namkalsish. Namkalsish, the black-skinned one.
Mm-hmm.
And the wings were somewhere around 25 feet across.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a petroglyph in a bay called North Kaigani Harbor, just about 5-6 miles from where the village was. And there's a petroglyph on an outcropping of rock. So I took a picture of it, and I showed my dad's brother this prayer here. He looked at it, and he said, that's the giant black eagle that lived in the high places and has not been seen for many generations. And I was staying, as I was in Arizona, a house guest with this Thomas Binyanka. Thomas Binyanka was the Hopi prophet. And anyway, I was staying in his house. I showed him that picture, and he said exactly the same thing my uncle said. The giant black eagle that lived in the high places, it hasn't been seen for many generations.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this was a giant condor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So this giant black eagle, is that Helang?
It could be.
Or is that a different
Helang.
being altogether?
Helang is more of a mythical one. This one here was an actual bird. But see, what happens too is all of your myths have an actual history that tells what it was, and then your history keepers will take that and create a myth and put in it all the knowledge was gained from that event. See, this one here, also they said would pick up sea mammals, like it could actually pick up, say, porpoise. And then pretty soon it became bigger to where it's picking up whales. And so that's why the history wasn't taught to everybody, because they start changing it. And what you're describing too is somewhat how the prairie tribes get their eagle feathers. Is you put a covering and they're concealed under it, and they have a rabbit tied up there with a string. When it comes down, they reach up and grab its legs. And they're supposed to, from what I understand, is to pull a tail feather out with their teeth. Because if they get it from the front, they're gonna get it right in the face, and that beak. So it sounds like very similar to like what they do, and it's very possible that maybe that's what you did. You went and got the black feather, because the feather was supposed to be used for searching for life, for water. Part of our history, when I was saying that about Cloud Keegan, I'm telling the story of all the humans. 78,000 years ago, there was a huge supervolcano exploded, and our history tells how we survived it, and then afterward, everything was covered with ashes, and food was almost impossible to find, unless maybe they found something that had burned, was cooked to death, and then so they would find maybe some cooked meat. But as they were traveling, and they come to water, they go drink the water, and sometimes some of them died from it. It was polluted, or maybe they got sick. But they noticed that if a bird washed itself in that water, if the water beat it up on the feathers, you could probably drink it. If it didn't, you couldn't drink it. And so this person that carried the feather would dip the feather into the water. If it, like I said, if it didn't beat up, if it just ran, then they didn't drink. But if it beat it up, that one would be the only one to drink. And then if the person was okay, the others would drink. So the feather was used to find water. And later it began to take on more religious aspects of closest thing to Creator. Well, we're going to talk about that when we get to this prayer from me to. But anyway, what those old guys would do to me is we'd be sitting like this, and that person would stand up and say, "You come sit over here." And so I'd sit there, and he'd say, "Now tell me everything that's behind you." And this was in a store, a big general store. And so there were shelves of food and different things. And so I would have to describe what was on that. And it took me a while to learn, but what they started doing to me too is every day when I would walk there, it's about half a mile, I guess, from our house to the big store. And they would ask me, "What did you see and what did you learn?" I didn't see nothing, I didn't learn nothing. But then I started describing. I saw somebody's house, and I saw a ditch on this side, and things like that. And then the next day they asked me again, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day. And so I kept giving more and more detail. It took me a few years to learn that what they were doing was I was learning to see not only what's supposed to be there, but what's not supposed to be there. And more importantly, what's missing. And so the way I'd do it is I'd walk along and I'd close my eyes, and then when I'd tell them what I saw, I would close my eyes and then look at it and open my eyes, but my eyes were still closed with them open. And I'd describe what I saw. And then I start doing that the same thing. When I sat down there, I'd look at what's over there, I'd look at it, take a picture of it, and then when they tell me to change places, I could close my eyes and rewind and describe it. So that's how that system was. And then one would show me something, he would tell me something. And the next day, he'd tell me, like, go see Ginawan. Go show Ginawan what I showed you. So I'd walk over to his house. It's Ben Duncan was his name. Ben Duncan's father was his father was a brother to my grandmother's father. So we're kind of related. And so I'd go to his house and show him what God wanted to show me. If I made a mistake, I had to go back and start over. Sometimes it might even be a vocal inflection on a certain term, something, and I have to start over. And this went on for years. And so when in that story, here in this dictionary, under the term for prayer, what it says in there is Sanhlga usuu. You're saying this for one's own sake. You don't pray for anybody else because you can't know what somebody else needs or whatever they want. And so it's inside. And in here they talk about Sanhlga usuu. Sanhlga usuu. Say it for your own sake. Chayal kui Sanhlga usuu. They used to pray to the sun for safety, and that's not quite true. What it was, when that volcano exploded, the sky was covered with a blanket of soot and dirt, and you couldn't see the sun. Except around noon, you might see a little flash of light. And so finally, when Sanhlga, when the light swept away the dark, and light returned, and everybody went out of the caves where they'd survived, and they had to wade through, science says there was 9 meters of ash, but they had to wade through it to get down to the shoreline where they could wash that ashes off because it burned. It was, when it was wet, to get that on you, it would burn. I guess it was like sulfuric acid. But anyway, they would thank the sun for returning to bring warmth and heat and light and life and a sense of safety back to us. And so they didn't pray to it for safety. They were thanking the sun for this gift. And also, it says in there, they also used to pray to the mountains. But what they were doing is they're thanking aat'aay for providing them safe haven. See, Sanhlga, so don't ever use the word shaman. That's from another tribe of people in Siberia called Uvenk, U-V-E-N-K. But anyway, Haida told the people that something was out of balance, something was wrong. So he was going to go to this high place to see if he could understand what it was. And he was gone for quite a while. And when he came back, he called everybody together and told them that this thing was going to happen and to get ready. Well, it was along the ocean, and the way it's described, it was a large crescent-shaped bay, and from one side to the other was about 10 days walk to halfway. People were short, so maybe we don't know how far they walked, but they got food from out there. It was shallow. They would wade out and they would catch fish and other things, but there's no description of tide. So that part I don't know about. Maybe it was there, maybe they just didn't describe it. But when the water was shallow, they would go out and they would get certain things and eat. some of them made them sick. Sometimes they died from eating whatever it was. So what they did was they see these birds would come down and pick things up. So they start setting things out on rocks to see what the birds would eat. And through that process, they noticed, when the food got dry, they could eat it. And so they started learning how to dry food. And what it is, the mythology part of it says Raven taught us how to do it. So, and before Raven was another being called U'ala'a. U'ala'a is, the counterpart is in ancient Egypt, Horus. Horus had the head of a falcon and the body of a human. And Horus was the one that brought healing. And was a shapeshifter. The same was U'ala'a. And so what happened was people didn't start passing on that teaching, but they start putting all those attributes into Raven. And the reason for that was many centuries later when we start traveling, some people followed the ocean circle all the way around. In every place they stopped, there was ravens. And ravens would inform them of things, would warn them of things. So they adopted the raven as their crest. And this was after the ice when they came back to Eastway. And there were 10 half canoes. Today that's what we called it, but today we call them rafts, that came in. When the tide, there's a line of foam from the surf. When the tide sets in, that foam line is set against the beach. When the tide is ebbing, it moves out away from the beach. It says when these came in, they came in with the foam. And the people on the beach recognized them because they still spoke the same language. But our history people changed it, and they said that these ones were descendants of Foam Woman. Foam Woman had 10 daughters and 10 breasts. And what it was there were 10 of these canoes, half canoes, and when they came ashore, they could only marry the ones that were already here. This was the agreement that was made, so they didn't end up just so inbred. So the ones who came in with the foam would marry the others. So the others that were here, they had to have something that signified who they were. And so their first choice was that cultist, the black-skinned eagle. But after, when the ice came, that one left, and it didn't come back. And many of the people, see, we lived farther north when we first came here about 50,000 years ago. And then the climate change we're experiencing now happened 5 cycles ago, 26,000 years ago. And so people moved south to get away from the cold, and some stayed. And those are the ones, say, from Bella Bella on down along the coast, we call Getuyas. As the children of Getuyas. They're the children of the ones who stayed when the ice came. So they've been here a very, very long time, at least as long as we have. And so it's not just 10,000 years. It's probably closer to 35 to 50,000 years. Because this is where we became people. It took a long time to learn to be human. And when people were moving across it, and the way it describes it, I always picture something like from the African plains where you had short trees and grass, and the people were kind of like birds. They would sleep in the trees because predators couldn't get them, and they kept moving because to find food. And what they started doing from time to time was eating the flesh of animals. And that's when the process began for us to become from, instead of these simian to sapien, we started to make that change to become human. And they came to a cliff, a high cliff, and the predators were getting closer, these big animals. And they couldn't get around it, so they climbed up and they got on the other side, and it was that bay. In a way, you could call it Eden, what the Hebrews called heaven, because now the predators that could get them, could eat them, couldn't get to them because not only the rock outcropping, but there was low mountains and heavy vegetation. And there was a thing that grew there that was kind of a total food. And the way it was described to me, it sounds like if you take an eggplant, you know how it's tapered. Well, this one was large on both ends and tapered smaller in the middle. And it was kind of the color of a persimmon, a reddish orange color, and it grew in like a heavy hedge thing, and this is what people ate. And that was the primary food. And it says that in this climate change, many of the foods that we're accustomed to are not going to be here. And the Mayans are talking about how the corn spirit, the earth cracked and it opened and the corn spirit came out. And that crack has been closing for a while. For a long time it was very wide, but it's now down to about this far now. And when that closes, the corn spirit is going to be gone. And so this other one is going to reemerge. I don't know how it was called, but this reddish orange one plant is going to come back. So when we talk about those places, about the prayer, about the mountain and about the sun, after the ice, our canoes were looking for people who left. Some Haidas left with the people we call the cloak people. In 1996, my dad and I met them in New Zealand. They're called Waitaha, the water carriers. But they got there before the Polynesian Maori, and they were like Haidas. They were tall, fair-skinned people, and they were peaceful. And the people in South America attacked them, but they left behind these carvings, these huge stone heads were left behind by them, and they fled into the ocean. And nobody knew what happened to them. And in 1996, I got a call from a filmmaker in Auckland saying that she was doing interviewing the old ones. And there were some that knew the stories of the high-bowed canoes that came from the north. And if I wanted to meet them, to come to New Zealand. So I was here in Vancouver, and I called my dad, who was in Heidelberg. Dad, you want to go to New Zealand? He said, my bag's packed. So he came to Vancouver, and we flew to Hawaii. And we spent about a week there, and then we went to Samoa, and we were there for 2 weeks at a festival. And I sat on a panel on non-instrument navigation to talk about how our ancestors had gotten to Hawaii and how they got to New Zealand, but it was by following that bird called aat'aay. Aat'aay is the Pacific golden plover that in spring it flies from New Zealand across the Pacific, across Hawaii, up to north of Hawaii, and then on up into the Arctic, where they nest. They have their young and fly all the way back to New Zealand. They're only about this big. They stand about this tall. So Google it, Pacific golden plover, Plover. There's two flyways. The other one goes along Asia and goes up to Siberia. So I don't remember how many thousand miles they fly round trip. But that's where we got our crest from, the two-headed eagle. Strathcona people.
Yeah.
And but anyway, I digress. So anyway, when the ice began to melt, people began to move back north. And the Dene people were the first ones to arrive. Today they're called Dene. But if you look at them, what's called Athabaskan in Alaska, they speak the same language as Navajos. And the Tlingit people speak the same as the Apaches. It's all that one family of languages called Athapaskan, spelled with a P, Athapaskan. And so all of them we call aat'aay, the eagle people, because as they were coming north, the bald eagle came with them. And that was their name for the bald eagle. And I was told one translation, but I've been asking around to get clarification on it, because usually where birds sit, it turns white. And so they described that this eagle's head was like, bird droppings on its head. So I've got to get clarification. I've asked some, there's been a couple of said that's what it was, but others denied. So I don't know what it is. So we borrowed that word from them. And so all the Dene speaking people we call the eagle people. See, Bella Bella was Gitaoyas, they're the ones who stayed during the ice. The Kwakpala people on the west coast of Vancouver Island, down to the Suquamish, that was Chief Seattle's people. They stayed during the time of the ice, and some of them in the Olympic Peninsula on the west coast, they all stayed during the time of the ice. And so when we finally got here to, it was described as Sanhlga the atmosphere of the weather was always warm. It was pleasant, always pleasant. Not people like to use the word good for everything, but it was described of where it wasn't ever cold. It was tropical. And scientists have found that the Arctic, Alaskan Arctic, and over in Siberia was tropical. They found the trees, everything. And the plants, and the horses were here, and there were camels. But as the climate change began, they left. So the horses were actually here long before the Spaniards brought them, and the camels. But anyway,
Sorry to interrupt you. So, the two-headed eagle crest that you guys have is from that, and it has nothing to do with the Russians. Is it the
No.
Russians' flag, or one of their things where they have the double-headed eagle?
no, I don't know where theirs came from.
Oh,
But ours came from this man. He was a house chief. He and his brother had gone to another village for something. And when he got back, this house chief, as he went in his house, this Natyak'u is the true nephew, the one that sits back to back with his uncle. He's the one that's supposed to inherit. This one had died. I don't know the cause of death, but his body was laid out there in the house. And so this man was so upset that he decided to go walk on the beach. And as he went to the door, he looked up, and over on a tree branch there was two eagles sitting there facing opposite directions, making it look like one eagle with two heads. And so all of our clans come from historic events or places. So that crest, that crest was adopted at that time, but the name for it came much later. It had to do with some guys had gone out, there's four of them, on a small canoe to fish for black cod, and a southeaster came up real fast. Before they could get ashore, they got caught in it, And so they were trying, all they could do was ride it out. 3 were on the paddles and 1 guy was bailing. And they kept this one for a few days. And then one day they could hear breakers, and they knew if they got in the breakers they wouldn't make it, they wouldn't survive. But as they got close, it was Jawas. That's a rock sticking up out of the water. It's thrust up out of the water, but it's also that was the first name for Langara Island. It's a rock sticking out of the water. There was not really trees on it at the time. But anyway, they managed to get on the leeward side and get ashore. And they used their canoe, they tipped it up to make a shelter. And they had food in the canoe, and they had some bark and stuff so they could build a fire. And they were gonna stay there and ride out the storm. And it lasted for quite a while, but there was these huge sea mammals that pulled themselves up out of the water, and they're extinct now. But because I think what they were is what's called a sea cow. And when the Europeans came in, they killed them all because they were good eating. And some of them were on the beach, and the guys were getting, they couldn't fish or anything. So they managed to kill one of these big animals because they couldn't move very fast. And they skinned it, and they used some of that bark from the Douglas fir that they used to burn in the canoe, burn like coal. They used that to start the fire, and then they used mussel shells too. And some wood that was found, and they smoked some of that meat while the storm was going on. And they laid that skin out and then cut it, a strip, well, they said as wide as a big man's thumb. And they cut it in a spiral. And then they laid it out on a rock, put rocks on it so it'd be straight, and they were going to make a rope bike out of it. But anyway, when the weather let up, they decided they're going to try it. So they went out. There were still big seas, but the wind wasn't. And as they started, they saw these birds flying over, and they recognized them because in the spring when they go out into the Gulf of Alaska, 2 days out to get the fur seals, they would see these birds coming over the horizon, and they assumed they're seabirds because there's nothing out there. And one of these birds came fluttering down. They pulled alongside, and the guy picked it up with his paddle, and he set it in the canoe, and they saw that it didn't have webbed feet, so they knew it was a land bird. And but you always carry a picture of where home is, so they knew where home was. But they decided to follow these birds because they knew the birds are going to fly right over, right close by where the village was. And so when they got home, they named the village Strathcona. Lana's a village. Tet is that bird. And so we two-headed eagles became known because that's where we came from Strathcona. So that became our clan. Whereas the ravens came from a place called Yak, another village, Yak. So they're Yaplanas. So they're on the raven side. So we're the eagle side, Atlanas. So that's where ours comes from. But anyway,
What's the difference between a myth like the thunderbird that goes around the world and this black-skinned eagle that actually, are they kind of related, or the stories become one at some point? Or?
I think they kind of get mixed in together. I don't know for certain. I know there was a woman from home, her name was Helangjat. Helang is that thunderbird. So this is thunderbird woman.
Because every culture has that story about that thunderbird, and if those birds are that big, they would cover it. They would go around.
It's like I said about that being that was half bird and half human. It's found in Egypt and found here. because we all come from the same place. It says like my head, we're all different, but we all come attached to the same place. I was doing storytelling over at Singing Frog with these little kids, and it's like herding cats. Little kids going, outlaw, outlaw, I was saying to them. And one of the workers came over and said, what's that word? I said, which one? She says, outlaw. Oh, I said, that, sit down. She said, Afghani, that's the same word.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Holy smokes.
And then the Turks, they have a word, juju. Juju is when you talk about something small. They have a slightly different pronunciation, but it's the same thing in their language. So when you start looking at it, and then you look at the root word for soul, ha, is what we use, ha. The Polynesians use ha. The Egyptians used Ra. And I think the Hebrews used Yah, like Yahweh. And with the Mayans, their description of Supreme Being is that's how they that represents their concept, we'll say, of God. It's the same way in Haida. The square represents tangible. The circle is intangible. Our intangible one we call Sums Kamaus Hanwai. Excuse me. Sums Kamaus Hanwai can be translated as big spirit in the air. It's invisible. It exists nowhere, in nothing, and brought everything into the light. Sums Hanwai, the one that's tangible, and if you look at that word on Uncle's prayer, that first word on there, if you pronounce it slowly, it's sum. See this one, yeah, sum, because the A is pronounced as a U in sun.
Thank you.
So you stop at sun, and then you pronounce the S and the G, han. It's like I got something stuck in my throat. Sanhlga is a spirit person. That's that medicine doctor. Sanhlga. So Sanhlga. Sanhlga. That's the one that is described as the big spirit that in the atmosphere. We can't see it, but we can always sense its presence. We always know it's here, the atmosphere. You can feel the changes of it, so you know it's a living thing. And so when Uncle Meto, Claude says, Sanhlga, Claude Sindum, that HL, capital HL, they're both the same word. So in the prayer he's saying, big spirit, this one also thanks you also. Sun without the accent over the A on SAN, that means also. Flau, Sanhlga, Klassen dum is you. Big spirit in the atmosphere. I'm expressing my gratitude. Gin Wadluan, Beat Gum Sa'aden, Some Wade, Dum Kilwaden, Some Sapanawai, Sapanawai. So when you see that Sapan, that's what we refer to also as, like I said, that medicine person, Sapaga. And when we refer to the orca, it's called Sapan. Sapan is a orca killer whale. We didn't call it killer whale, we called it whale killer because people witnessed them killing whale. And it said what they do is they tear the jaw off and go for the tongue or something, that part in them is what they were after. And with a halberd, they would take and bite a certain chunk where the liver is. They would take that part.
So they're just after one part of it?
And some of them, unless they're very hungry, because there's certain nutritions I guess they gotta have.
Same with bear.
But then the other
What's that?
creatures will feed on the remains.
But see, they leave something for the other creatures also. So they don't, in that prayer I was telling you about that we got from Mexico. Mexico is what is now called Mexico. And some of the people of Mexican ancestries are called Chicano. Chicano, and that's where that Chicano comes from, that Mexico is where that term comes from. But in that one, people would face to the east in the morning as the sun came up, and they put their hands up like this, like a triangle, so that the sun would shine on their forehead. And as they would bring it down this way, they would ask to be re-empowered in the ways of my ancestors. I ask for the strength to be strong enough to be weak, to have a kind heart. The courage to be tall enough to not be small. The clear vision to see where I've been. The guidance to take me where I'm going. The protection I need on my journey. Now it's complete. Thank you for making me human, born of a woman. The usuu. My spirit says so too. So they would do that each morning. The sun, that's your chakras. You'd be re-empowered in the ways of your ancestors. So they would do that.
So that's really not Illuminati stuff that comes from the indigenous people from Mexico?
Oh, that's where we got it from, is from them. And, but again, it comes from that we survived that super volcano exploding.
Was that like sort of
Huh?
volcano woman? Is that part of the?
I don't know
Story.
much about volcano woman except to stay away from her.
That's more of
Mostly no
a
wine.
No,
Sibshan
the
story.
Polynesians talk about the volcano woman and Haida, the red-headed women, are the descendants of volcano woman. But I don't know anything about it.
What about frog woman and volcano woman when they became the Gitsan?
I see that one, I don't know that either.
They have a comic book on it,
Uh-huh.
about volcano women and using hydrographics and everything.
Because there was a volcano, you go from Langara Island, you go about west-northwest, and I don't remember how far out it was, but seismically, that's the most active area of the whole Pacific Rim. It's out there off the Haida Prayer.
Isn't that Toe Hill made from?
What?
Toe Hill made from the volcano ashes? Or?
I don't know if that was it, because see, it was farther out, but see, Toe Hill has a brother. There's another one farther south, because the history said that that the two brothers separated. There were four. Two of them separated. one moved away and one went under the ocean. And I don't remember, I was telling Todd and some others where it was, out in Hecate Straits. And UBC sent some people out there and they found it. They found that area down in Hecate Straits where there was fire pits and stuff left from
You have two brothers, you
Huh?
said? You have two brothers?
It was said two brothers, one is Toe Hill.
Yeah.
And I forget the name of the other one. But see, when, what gets kind of confusing is I was taught the history, but not the mythology. I only learned part of the mythology. And one guy in Masset, a guy named Henry Geddes, I was talking to, I guess it was, he and Willis White's mothers were sisters, or Henry's mother and Willis's father were brother and sister. But anyway, I was talking to Willis about something, and he said, go talk to Henry, he knows those things. So I went to see Henry, and I said, Uncle Willis said you know the story about the canoes going to New Zealand. And he asked, what do you know about it? So I told him what I knew about that set. And when they got passed away, it was called Huntloss is what we call that island. And when Hawaiians showed up, they called it Kauai. But Huntloss is an island with a lake in there, fresh water. And on the northwest side of the island, there's a waterfall from a big lagoon of fresh water. And that's where they first made landfall. But anyway, I told Henry that when the canoes started going south, there was like a cross in the sky, starfish in the sky. And today it's called the Southern Cross because there's stars like that. But they were going toward that, and there were shallow places where they could dive for food. He says, Tom, stop. And they started talking. He said, in Haida we call those hot spots because there's lots of grub down there. The canoes would stop and they would dive down and replenish what food sources they had. There's a totem in Saxon, Alaska. The bottom figure on it is a human figure with his hand trapped in the teeth of another creature. And the guy who carved it, Kaju is his name. Kaju walks hotly. It's like a raven walks around with his nose in the air about everything. But Henry Haldane, Victor Haldane was his English name. But during the 1930s, they had what was called a Civilian Conservation Corps. And through that Civilian Conservation Corps, they brought old poles in from the old villages. My dad was the one who was doing it from Heidelberg. And other poles that were badly deteriorated were recarved. And some new ones were carved. Well, Victor carved that one, showing that hand caught in there. And it's the story from when those canoes were going on their way to New Zealand. When they would dive down, they'd leave one person in the canoe. And then when they come up, this person would go down. And so when they got back in the canoe, he dove down. And when he didn't come back up, one of the guys looked down and said he's in trouble. He was struggling with something, so they dove to go get him. But they lost sight of him when they dove into the water, and when they got there, he wasn't there. But his hand was trapped in the jaws of a giant clam. And inside that clam would would lay there. Those things are about this big, I guess. And it's open like this, and there's like a lure, like your uvula, stanga. And without goggles, things were a little fuzzy. And he saw that. He assumed what happens. He reached in for that, and that's what, when fish something would go in there, that clam would close, and so they figured that he got caught by that, and his knife was on a lanyard on his wrist. That's what they would do so they didn't drop it, and they could just grab a hold of it. But since his hand was trapped in there, and he couldn't work it off, I guess, and so those giant clams are only found in the southwestern Pacific, and they're called the old ones, the wanderers. They roll along the seabed. That's how they travel, is by rolling. And apparently this one, where they were, was sort of like a sea mount, where there's warm water and stuff, lots of food. It rolled off into the deep within them. At least that's what they assume happened. So that's what the story is on that. It's carved on that pole. Well, the Tlingit people claim it was theirs. The story of a man who got his hand caught by a rock oyster and a tide came in and drowned him. Well, rock oyster's only about this big, and to get his hand caught in there might be difficult unless it was a pretty good sized one. So anyway, Henry told me that story, and I was sitting there looking at him. He just says, he was also trained from the time he was a little boy. They would pick one when you're born, but they didn't tell anybody who they were. People weren't supposed to reveal themselves. I was told the same thing. But after I graduated law school, my uncle Louis Kikun sent for me and my dad and my dad's older sister and Clara Natcombe, and he wanted to give me his name. Well, he'd gotten the name from Harris Natcombe, and Clara was his wife, well, his widow, and Esther, my dad's older sister, and so he gave me that name, Kamansana. I was the first one to walk in the house with a newborn child with a law degree. But they said what it was I had a responsibility. The person with the knowledge has the responsibility of passing it on to make it available. The one without it has the responsibility to seek it. And when that one finds it, has to ask for it. Because the one with the knowledge cannot offer it. That's an insult. Because if I'm offering it, I'm saying I'm smarter than you. But if you ask for it, I can't say no. But what I have to do is determine what it is you really want to know, and how much can you handle, and how fast can you handle it. And so the way my grandfather, my Tanaz, said it was, if it's to be given properly, it must be given slowly. This one's life is just beginning. Ours is beginning to fade. So we're going to have to give him everything we can with the breathing left to us. But if it's to be done properly, it has to be done slowly. And so I was 67 when my last teacher died, and that started when I was 3 years old. And I was told that I had to find somebody to pass it on to. But if you don't find somebody, don't worry about it. You can do it later. And I said, when we leave this bag of meat and bones behind, we come back because there is something that we haven't learned. There is something we haven't finished. there's something we haven't passed on to somebody, and the fourth time is my choice. If I choose to come back that fourth time, I can come back as many times as I choose. So my Tanakh said, you've been among us before. I don't have a sense of that like you do. I just have a sense of being very old.
So, there's not very many speakers left in Huntkill, right? So there's probably even less storytellers left,
Yeah.
right? There must be only a handful of you guys left. Are you planning on writing a book or writing books?
No, I've chosen not to write because people will start arguing over what the words mean. Begin
Already
debating
on
it.
Facebook, someone complained that we don't have a word for stupid.
What?
We don't have a word for stupid. People argue. There's no reason for it, because it's all supposed to be positive. If we do it all with a positive spin, not a negative spin, and put people down, lift people up. But again, people will argue.
I've had people say I'm making stuff up. And others say, well, that's not how it is. And I said, well, you tell me how it is. I wanna get it right. I don't know, but that's not it.
That's how some people do.
So I'm not saying that everything I say is the gospel. I'm just telling you what I was taught. It's not my own. But when Uncle gave me the name, he said, do you remember? And he asked, what do you remember? And I told him what I remembered from being a little boy about what the instructions were given me. And I was never to reveal myself, because there are ones, if they know what you are, they'll try to destroy you. And he said, you left something out. I said, I know, because I'm scared. He said, the time will come when you have to speak out. And when the first time I started, I actually had people threaten to do me some harm. I built a traditional Haida sweat house, and I was told that if I didn't stop talking against Jesus, they were going to burn it down around my ears. And I hadn't even mentioned Jesus. I was just talking about things I'm talking about here. So I thought I better keep quiet. But then I was told to come here, not specifically to Vancouver, but to go among the Salish, because the Salish have a medicine made from birch. It's made by the women, and it will protect you, even though they don't know who you are. And I was down in Washington somewhere, and I started feeling really weird. And I called home, and my wife sounded strange, and I asked, what's wrong? And she said, I don't know. She said, I'm kind of mixed up about it. I said, I'll be right there. So I told the people at that, it was a storytellers conference thing. So I came home, and I took her to the doctor, and the doctor said she was dehydrated. And so I give her Gatorade to replace electrolytes and stuff. But as soon as I got back here, I felt just fine again. And what it is there's a guy there that has been learning how to do the dirty business. And I could feel it from him.
Bad
Even
medicine?
even though he wasn't doing that to me. And what was described to me, it's like I'm carrying a reflector that when they throw that at me, it'll hit them, but I have to be careful, it might bounce and hit my wife or somebody close to me. So, those things are real, it's not, you know.
That's why we,
There's
that's why
people
we wear
That's
abalone,
probably what
right?
my ex is all
That's why
about.
we wear abalone.
Yeah.
That's what,
Deflected too much.
one of the master carvers told me.
Wow.
When I asked him about it, I said, how come we wear abalone? He said it reflects, like bad, yeah, bad medicine, bad energy, it reflects it like away from you.
But we eagles say, that's all ravens, they like to wear shiny things. But I'm eagle. There was a pole at Windy Bay, I forget the name of the village site. But there was a pole there that had inlaid with abalone, and when the sun came up, they could see the reflection from the mainland, all the way across Hickett Straits. But the smallpox hit the place, and I don't know if they did it deliberately, but the whole village burned. And when we were getting ready to put up a house there, there were long mounds, you know, about this high, of like moss, and you peel it back and it was all charcoal. It was those logs that had been burned. This house, they were still like they burned right there on the ground. And when we dug the holes to put the post in, some of the beads we found were pink. There's some real pretty different colors of beads that was there. And so abalone, I guess I didn't hear that part of it. There's lots of things I didn't hear. But you had a question?
The archaeologists, do you talk to any of them as they study, like if you don't write things down, archaeologists will dig it up sort of thing? And they dug up those Haida style canoes all over the world, but they were really reluctant to say they were Haida canoes, so I was just wondering like if archaeologists ever approach you on certain matters of...
Well, they don't really want to know.
Someone else got it for themselves.
There was, I don't know what they were doing there in Craig, Alaska. I think they were going farther up to find where this glacier had been. They can find where they were because the ice pushed up huge mounds of earth. It's like a bulldozer pushing it when it's moving. And on the north end of Prince Edward Island, it's about 75 miles long, and to get up there on the north end of it. Around here someplace was a village called Sagwaquan. And later there was a village across from Heidelberg that was called Saquon. But this is what it was supposed to be, Sagwaquan. That's a community at the north end of the land. And this one was called Sagwaquan Lamai. Lamai was the forerunner to villages. It's before it really became organized. But what I was getting toward was when I said it took a long time for us to learn to be human. And then there was a period we had to learn to be people. And it said as we were moving, each people was put on a land that looked like them. And they were given language that sounded like that land. It described all the things on that land, all the beings, and were given a ceremony to maintain the balance. And so Haida country is exactly where it's supposed to be. And that's why I was saying, you know, with our language, you listen to the sounds of raven. You got ka, 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 ka. Those are the sounds of raven. But so as each people came into being, they're put on land that looked like them. They were given a language that sounds like that land, describes it, and all the beings there. And so that's when we became people, is when we began to have our own languages. We started being different from each other as we began to take on specific linguistic. That's why in Haida you don't ask you know, what race are you? They ask what's your nationality, what's your language. So that's how we all begin to change and get. It says when we left that place and started walking, we walked for a very long time, and part of that history talks about we were always walking. And what it was the people spread out in a line and began moving across the land. And if one of them found food or water, word would go to the others. And they would help each other. And over time, they spread out farther and farther. So each one begins to sound different. This one here would sound very different from this one. Whereas these two might sound very much the same, but not quite the same as this one. And it says as we're moving like that, that's how we start seeing different things. Because we don't have all the same things in our environment. Our word for horse, Kyo-iwans, it just means big ears, but it's also a mule. An elephant is long teeth because of the tusk. And then some things we just had to make up names for, like the orange. Citrus fruit is kolskune. Kolskune means stink skin. Is an orange, because when you go to peel it, you get a little whiff of that.
Why do you
pear,
call a carrot an orange?
well, a pear is just an apple with a tail. So, but anyway, when I was trying to get to what Uncle was saying here, it's really important that aat'aay, when you look at it, make sure that you and it's a rhythm that makes it easier to pronounce. Aat'aay, aat'aay. See, the vocal inflection goes up with that A after the underlined E.
Could you go through the whole thing for
Yeah.
us, please?
Aat'aay, Sindum and then on the next one, get Wadluan. That pinch would be a 7 in front of that W, because that sound there, you tighten your abdomen here and then force Wadluan. Just give it a try. Wadluan. Yeah, Wadluan. Yeah, get Wadluan. See, it goes up and Wadluan. So when you start, the rhythm of the language is like singing a song. If you change the notes, it changes the message. Get Wadluan. Iklan. That pinch by the L measure. Clan. See, we have a TL and we have a TL for the pinch. Clue, like antler. Clue. Yeah, you put your tongue behind your teeth and hold in and then push it out the side. See how easy it is?
It's really a lot of work.
Actually, when you start doing this, you're gonna find your face gets tired and sore because you're using muscles you've never used. I know when I was learning German, you know, you have to, wir reitet so spät durch Nacht und Wind. That's for the Nebelkind. It was a poem we had to learn in German about the about this fog creature, and then we also had to learn about Sneewittchen, you know, Snow White. And so when you start learning different languages, jeg tænker jeg forelsker dig. Kvinde, jeg tænker jeg forelsker dig. Young lady, I think I love you. So yeah, so this TL sound, on, dum, klar. See, there's a TLA, klar, laden. Again, it's with that pinch there, so it's not laden, it's laden. Wade. Dum. Again, it's that mark there says your voice goes up, not down, bang. Dum. The MG sound is not ing. Dum, yeah. Dum. And then HL, don't kill Laden. Six aat'aay. You make everything good for us, and I'm thanking you for that big spirit. Aat'aay sinkum Laden. Aat'aay sinkum Laden. Simmerdan eet Genangam. Yeah, there's only one A there. Us. Not us, but us. Don't pick on us. Yeah, don't spit on anybody when you say it too. Yeah, it's like my Tanakh said, Haida was very difficult to learn because first you gotta cough it up, then you chew on it a little bit and then spit it out.
Can you say that first one again?
Aat'aay. Aat'aay. Yeah, Aat'aay. Singam. Sin is also.
It's not sun, it's sin.
Sin, yeah, sin like sun.
S-I-N kind of. Sin. Okay.
Wagyan, the lung. Kastlam. See, this is the K with the pinch and underline. That's different from this one. This is ka, and this is ka. It's down in the throat. Ka. So that word kastlam. So that's glam, deal, glam. And the accent over the A means that it goes glam. It goes up. Glam. Kaslan. Kaslan. So getting the rhythm makes it easier to pronounce too. Kaslan. Similar from H, E-E-H-L. Sometimes people write that as E-I rather than, but this E-E.
Yeah, that's where I get messed up. It's E-E-H-L. It's pronounced A.
This is pronounced like A, not, yeah, so that, A, Ginongam. Not gin is what you drink. So it's Ge Num Gum Ginungum. You got it?
Ginungum.
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 It's easier if you're not eating.
I thought it sounded better because I was chewing it up and trying to spit it out. I was halfway there.
When I have a peanut butter sandwich,
Yeah.
and I talk Haida.
I was gonna choke on
sound
it.
real
Your
good.
speech problem.
Right then. Peanut butter. Said when he eats peanut butter, it makes it Haida sound real good.
Yeah, I can see that.
There's another one that might be a little bit hard to pronounce.
I'll take a bigger bite.
So, yeah, Friday the 14th, your next class.
Oh yeah, next Friday.
Cook's gonna stick with, right? Cook is wood, right?
It's a little bit more than kukum.
That's it?
That's the word at the bottom of that. Okay.
Ooh, their hearts will stink. My goodness.
They'll have.
Come on. See, there's come on. Eat the dum. Eat
That's Mr. Ford.
Eat
See,
This
I'm
is
getting
one
that,
of the-
I'm getting this one confused with that second line over here. This one is I-L-L and apostrophe, this one is,
Well, the one with the I-I-L is il, and the other was eat.
Yeah, we're done in 2
I know.
weeks.
Ooh, oh, they're waiting to come in.
Yeah.
Which group you looking for?